Behnam Taleblu is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He joins us now. Sir, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. I guess that really is the first question. You have the Taliban now controlling the country. Clearly, ISIS-X is involved in this. What do you see for the immediate, maybe even long-term future of Afghanistan?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, but it's certainly not a pleasure to be seeing the scenes coming out of Afghanistan. And most predictably, this is going to be the end of the beginning. I expect more scenes like this, more terrorist attacks, more kind of strategic competition between the ISIS Khorasan branch, which was responsible for these attacks, which killed Americans and Afghans and wounded many others, between them and, of course, the Taliban, as well as, of course, a deteriorating situation for the Afghans on the ground, the Afghan Americans on the ground, the Americans who remain stuck there, most unfortunately, and then a fast deteriorating strategic situation for U.S. interests there as well.
Yeah, and you look at that and you talk about, you look at the chessboard in that region of the world, and it really does affect the neighbors as well. Michael Kugelman, who's the deputy director of the Asia program at the Woodrow Wilson Center, said the following here, quote, "Much is in geopolitical flux right now as Afghanistan's neighbors figure out how to adjust to an emerging Taliban regime. Not only has the Taliban, traditionally an anti-India group, seized power, but India's Chinese and Pakistani rivals are now poised to deepen their footprints in Afghanistan." So what does this mean, in your estimation, sir, for the neighbors of Afghanistan?
Oh, well, there's several ways to slice this issue, looking at this crisis in Afghanistan right now from the prism of Afghanistan's neighbors. You already know that the eastern and western borders are porous when it comes to three different types of trafficking or smuggling: drugs, weapons, and people. What you're going to add to that now on the people front, of course, is massive refugee influxes. For instance, there are multiple stories confirming flows of Afghan refugees into Pakistan, of course, as well as, of course, multiple stories confirming that there are Afghan refugees in at least 3 different checkpoints going over into Iran, which has had about 3 million Afghan refugees since the late 1970s, early 1980s, with the Soviet invasion and later American war there. Iran has strategically used and abused this Afghan population. It's with this population that they created a South Asian Shia fighting force in Syria, Afghan and Pakistani Shiites there specifically. And inside a place like Pakistan, of course, you're going to likely have Islamist parties bolstered by the Taliban win. Of course, the Pakistani faction of the Taliban, and of course another terrorist group, Lashkar-e-Taiba, which has carried out terrorist attacks in India. They will certainly welcome this. And of course, at the strategic level, great power competition level, the Chinese are moving closer to the Taliban and looking to kind of twist the knife in Washington's side here right now when it comes to great power competition. And this really is a bitter lesson that regional conflicts certainly have a global dimension to them.
You talked about Pakistan and India there. I wanted to go back to that if I could, because, you take outside of Afghanistan. Does this embolden Pakistan? Does this give Pakistan, does it give them, a lot of people in India are concerned that maybe Pakistan does something to India in the coming months or years because of what's happening in Afghanistan. Is that an overstatement?
I certainly don't think it's an overstatement, and especially it's not an overstatement if you're looking at those major Islamist parties that we talked about, and of course noting the role of the ISI, the Pakistani intelligence services, which really did surge in support there to many of these Islamist forces and Islamist factions, which don't treat the border that exists between Pakistan and Afghanistan as an actual border. They supported some of this insurgency, and I think they're certainly going to try to draw on what comes next and try to manage the situation. And I think if you are a U.S. partner in the region like India, you certainly are concerned.
Yeah, and then you go back to Afghanistan and you have, as we talked about, the Taliban running the country. You have ISIS-K. You talk about al-Qaeda, where, a lot of people have said al-Qaeda and the Taliban really are attached at the hip. How does that three-way dynamic work in a country that size?
Well, most unfortunately, it means that you can expect more of these kind of terrorist attacks, whether they're competing with one another to show their capabilities through acts of violence against the Afghan population, whether it's members of the Afghan population that supported the U.S. force mission there for about 2 decades, or of course innocent civilians, or those that they try to rein under their control through acts of violence and impose Sharia law on them again. So again, most unfortunately, amid this tripartite alliance of evil in Afghanistan, it's going to be the Afghan people that suffer most, and it's horrific to watch.
Yeah, and very, very quickly and lastly, China and Russia, how does this affect them in the immediate future, sir?
Well, China, again, is looking to capitalize on the political messaging component here. They're moving closer to the Taliban government in Kabul, or if you could call it a Taliban government at this point, but the Taliban takeover in Kabul. They know what this means from an optics perspective. The U.S. has long been treating this conflict as a backwater. Most unfortunately, it's how you get these kind of results in the end. But the Chinese are looking to signal that they will not let this major American defeat pass by unnoticed. And whether you're in Moscow, Beijing, Pyongyang, or Tehran, they're looking to capitalize on the scenes that we're seeing now in Afghanistan.